Meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We have a quorum present, so I'll call the meeting to order. First item on tonight's agenda is to approve the minutes of June 21st and July 12th, 2017. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, I'll declare them approved as submitted. We have 7 public hearings scheduled this evening. The first of which is the zoning application for approximately 21.93 acres located along Jobi Jackson Parkway and Manchester Pike to be rezoned from commercial highway to PRD, Jobi Jackson PRD. Richland South LLC is the applicant. Mr. Anthony, good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Richland South LLC has asked for rezoning for a 21.93 acre property located near the northwest corner of Manchester Pike and Jobi Jackson Parkway. The property is currently zoned CH, and the applicant wishes to rezone to PRD, or Planned Residential District. The proposed PRD would allow 199 single-family attached homes or townhouses. The gross density would be 9.1 units per acre, and I did double-check that number because my math has not been serving me well lately. The proposed development would have driveway connections on both Manchester Pike and Jobi Jackson Parkway. And other than the driveways themselves, this development would not include any frontage along either of those two streets. All of the street frontage would be reserved for future commercial development, not part of this rezoning request. Murfreesboro 2035 shows this area as being appropriate for general commercial. Preserving the street frontages for future commercial would appear to be consistent with that 2035 plan. Surrounding zoning includes CH to the west, PRD, and CH to the north, PUD to the east, and RM, which is county zoning, to the south. Rob Mulchan from SEC is here to talk more about this project. The Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing and then formulate a recommendation to the City Council. Staff can answer any questions that you may have, and we have passed out a supplementary item that was provided by Mr. Mulchan as well. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb, members of the Planning Commission. Rob Mulchan, SEC, on behalf of our client tonight, I want to give you a brief overview of the Jobi Jackson PRD. I'm accompanied tonight by Mr. Matt Taylor, Mr. Patrick Weber, the architect, and Mr. John Harney as well. I'll give you a little overview really quick about the site. As Donald alluded to, it is at the northwest quadrant of the intersection of Jobi Jackson Parkway and Manchester Pike. As you can see, the site itself is pretty much enclosed by the properties that we're leaving as CH around the perimeters. You have residential zoning to the north and also to the east. And you also have the church to the east as well on that side. Zoning, as Donald talked about, is primarily PRD and CH in this area. You have a large PUD to the east of Manchester Pike with RM zoning to the northeast and to the south, and also you have a planned industrial district to the southwest of the property. Is that to the Parkway Place development there that recently came through last year. Give you some quick overview of some of the pictures from the site itself. This is existing conditions. This is a view looking in from Manchester Pike into the site. This is roughly where the location for the entrance would be off of Manchester Pike. As you can see, pretty much just overgrown vegetation at this point in time. There's a view looking back out from the site back toward Manchester Pike. This is a view from the church on the eastern property line looking back into the site. And this is a view of the frontage along Jobi Jackson and roughly the location where we'll be entering the site. Our request tonight is for PRD, or Planned Residential District, for this. This will be 199 dwelling units on 21.93 acres for roughly about 9.1 dwelling units per acre. The project itself will provide at least 8 acres of open space. That'll be, a space around the actual townhomes and actual open spaces where we have functions and amenity areas. All the streets in the development will be private. They will have sidewalks on both sides of the streets for creating a very walkable community. And all utilities will be underground. As Donald alluded to, the overall project itself will more or less leave 4 commercial parcels along, 2 of them along Jobi Jackson and 2 along Manchester Pike. These are not included with this request because those parcels will be left as the existing commercial highway zoning districts that they're already accompanied with, so they're utilizing the CH zoning. The townhomes themselves will be 2-story buildings, minimum 1,300 square feet of livable space, minimum 2 bedrooms per unit. They'll have a mixture of 1 and 2 car front-loaded garages. The end units will have a 2-car garage typically on that side, and the internal units will have a 1-car garage. Each lot will provide at least a minimum 2 parking spaces. There'll be 1 in the garage and 1 in the driveway in front of the garage. The garages will be restricted through restrictive covenants in the zoning ordinance as well, in regards to only being utilized for vehicles, no storage of any materials inside the garage on that side. The 2-car garage situation will provide for 4 off-street parking spaces, 2 in the driveway and 2 in the garage. So with that being said, we also provide an additional 130-some parking spaces scattered throughout the development as guest spaces that are along the streets and convenient places throughout the development for guests who do show up for parties and such like that. So taking into account all the parking spaces off-street and the guest visitor spaces, this project will supplant go above and beyond the requirements for the bedrooms by 82 parking spaces. Property will be sold as horizontal property regime as well. Talk a little bit about the buildings themselves. The front building elevations will be primarily masonry products. There'll be brick, stone, or cement fiberboard. Vinyl will only be permitted in the trim and soffit areas. We'll also be utilizing the decorative garage doors. I did pass around to everyone tonight a little extra enlargement of the elevations for you to take a look at. I know it was one of the items that we discussed during the workshop in regards to how that decorative garage door appearance will look. We've gone back, revised that so that we've got more of the decorative style I think we were all looking for during the workshop session on that. Looking at the side elevations here, you can see the elevations themselves. The lower story will be primarily brick and stone. The second story will be cement fiber board. Vinyl will only be printed in the trim and soffit areas. The key characteristic about the side elevations of these is that the actual front doors for the side or the end units is actually on the sides. So you provide that opportunity to engage the side streets. So when you have a street that comes tying into the front street, you'll have that activation or engagement of the actual stoop and porch on the side street. The rear elevations will be a mixture of brick, stone, cement fiberboard, and vinyl siding. The second story will be cement board or vinyl siding. As you can see in this elevation here, the actual end units continue to wrap the masonry product around the base, so that as you come around the corners of the building themselves, the masonry product is on the base and also the cement fiberboard on the top. Vinyl siding will only be on the internal units. So on a 4 or 5 or 6 unit building, the internal units will only be vinyl sided on the back side from ground to roof line. As for amenities, we're looking at 2 main entrances, looking at masonry signage anchored by landscaping and lighting. Looking at our main amenity feature will be the park in the middle of the development there. You've got a outdoor pavilion and a playground structure, but you also have a large open lawn space for outdoor recreation or gathering space for the community itself. Also going to be incorporating a dog park and the mail kiosks for all mail deliveries within the development. In regards to access, we'll have 2 access points in the development itself, one up at Jobi Jackson. As you can see here, we're anticipating looking at 3 lanes of travel, 1 inbound and 2 outbound, right and left on the Jobi Jackson. And this will, the actual laneage itself will taper all the way back. Will be actually a 3-lane section for over 200 feet back into the site for adequate stacking, one for the development, but also potentially any commercial connections onto this from those lots. And this is the entrance off onto Manchester Pike. Again, 3-lane cross section, 1 in, 2 out. And again, they will also extend the full length of the commercial lots to provide enough stacking for everybody involved. With that, I'm open for any questions now or after the public hearing, and I appreciate your time and consideration of this matter.
Any questions for Mr. Moultramp at this time from the Planning Commission?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, before I open the public hearing, let me briefly describe our rules that we go by. We're here tonight to conduct public hearings on all these proposals, for the Planning Commission to be able to formulate a proposal to the council. The public hearings will open. We'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. If you would like to speak, come to the podium. Clearly state your name and give your address for the record, if you would. Keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes so other people have an opportunity to come up tonight too. If you have questions, the staff will make a note of your question, and we'll try to get those questions answered at the conclusion of the public hearing. Make all your comments to the Planning Commission itself and not other members of the audience, if you would, please. All that being said, I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Just come forward, please.
My name is Amy Walker, and I live at 4354 Aurora Circle, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And my question for the property, the presentation that was just made for the property on Jobi, Jackson, and Manchester, is the flow of traffic. I just moved over there to that area a year ago, as of a week ago, a year ago, and traffic is awful in the morning trying to get out to go to work. Will we encounter even worse problems over there? Especially this year we had the shelter in place, and all of that traffic trying to get out during that emergency situation. What else can be put in place to make sure that it's a smoother transition? The congestion is not what we experienced when I lived over here on River Rock. So those are things I ask you to consider in reference to the planning and the exiting of 199 homes in that area.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Anybody else? Nobody? In that case, I'll close the public hearing. Okay, Mr. Molchamp, can you address the question, please?
In regards to traffic, the Jobi Jackson's already expanded all the way to its 5-lane cross section at this point in time. I know that as we go through the process of the site plan development, Mr. Belishandra will be taking a look at our traffic numbers coming from the development itself and how the flows will be coming onto Jobi Jackson and also onto Manchester Pike. I'm sure he'll make some recommendations at that point in time as to if we need any extra, acceleration or deceleration lanes that might be appropriate in regards to the numbers of traffic that we're adding on to Jobi Jackson and the Manchester Pike.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Molchamp?
I don't have a question for Mr. Molchan, but do we have any idea? I know this topic came up when we talked about the FedEx project and any improvements to Manchester Pike that you know of?
I'm not aware at this time to any improvements for Manchester in that way. Not at this time.
It's a state route, so
Right.
it require their input on it, which is quite a lengthy progress, as we know. Any other questions for Mr. Molchamp while he's up here? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any comments or statements by the Planning Commission? If not, we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion we approve, subject to any and all staff comments.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. The next public hearing is a zoning application for approximately 24.15 acres located along Shelbyville Pike and Jobi Jackson Parkway to be rezoned from PCD to PUD. Marketplace at Savannah Ridge, PUD. Carl Story is the applicant. Yes, sir. Mr. Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carl Story has applied for a rezoning for this 24-acre property located at the northeast corner of Shelbyville Pike and Jobi Jackson Parkway. Property was zoned PCD back in 2006, and it included entitlements at that time for about 200,000 square feet of commercial space. The applicant now wishes to rezone to PUD to allow a mixed-use development that would include several components: a multi-tenant commercial structure, 8 commercial outlot parcels, 4 single-family residential lots, and 30 single-family attached dwelling units or townhouses. The site would be accessible from Shelbyville Pike, as well as Jobi Jackson Parkway and Hyannis Drive. Murfreesboro 2035 shows this area as appropriate for general commercial, and this request does appear to be consistent with that 2035 plan. The surrounding zoning includes RZ and County RM to the west, PCD and RS10 to the north, RS8 and RS15 to the east, and PCD to the south. So it's sort of a mixed bag of zoning in that area. A neighborhood meeting was held for this project back on June 19th at the Wilderness Station. We had good attendance, and the attendees indicated some concern with potential traffic, site buffers, and site access. We'll ask Matt Rule and Carl Story to give an overview of the rezoning request and to discuss how the pattern book addresses those concerns that were raised at that meeting. The Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing on this matter and then make a recommendation to the City Council. Staff can answer any questions now or after the public hearing.
Good evening, I'm Carl Story. So let's see. Escape into that.
The PowerPoint is pulled up.
Says questions. So.
That's yeah, if you X out of his, it'll be one of the other PowerPoints. That's
Gotcha.
yeah.
So is this up there? There we go. So anyway, little history. Some of you probably know we acquired this property 11 years ago, and at the time had the entitlements to build a big power center here. And anyway, retail world has changed since then, and our plan has changed. And we did have a great neighborhood meeting. I think sort of in just to address some of the specific concerns that were brought up. The getting some instruction over here. Great. All right, here's to go. Okay. So, so anyway, the sort of the different components of this, obviously, neighborhood retail. Probably going to be anchored by a grocery. We'll have the typical, retail uses you might see in a neighborhood center. Food, services, haircutter, soft goods, that kind of thing. One of the concerns about the townhomes was they're being visible to Savannah Ridge there, and then to address that concern, we've added berm and a landscape there along Wycheck Lane. And limited the entrance to the townhomes to one entrance there, which was a concern that we addressed. I think another concern was visibility of the proposed self-storage unit on Outlot 7 there from our neighbors over on Hyannis Drive there. We've added some landscaping around that stormwater management area there to address that concern. One other thing we did, I guess, through the townhomes there was add a sidewalk where the neighbors on Wycheck and Titan Circle there can access the development by walking down the sidewalk there. We're providing sort of a green space, amenity space over there where Titan Circle dead ends into the project that we think will be a nice amenity for the townhomes and our neighbors in Savannah Ridge there. One issue the city asked us to address was to have some flexibility as far as our stormwater capacity there in hopes of helping the city address some things that were going on downstream. And we've done that, and I think have some capacity to help with that. like all commercial developments like this, traffic was a concern that was brought up at our neighborhood meeting there. We have submitted our traffic study to the city. The city's interfacing with TDOT on our behalf. I know our team's looked at crash data there, like at Highfield, and where that comes out across the street from where our main entrance will be there. Looking at the timing of the lights at Jobi Jackson and Savannah Ridge, but anyway, we're looking at several acceleration, deacceleration lanes, possibility of another turn lane at Savannah Ridge. I think traffic lights a possibility, though remote there at Highfield. That's something we're going to pursue with the city and the state. But anyway, as far as we're concerned, all the solutions are on the table there that we would, that we're willing to consider about anything there to help do our part to address traffic concerns here. But anyway, I think that's sort of the highlights. I don't know. Our project will be in phases, and the first phase is probably the grocery component there. It's about 22,000 square feet and a couple of the outlots. The pink's probably a second phase. The townhomes would be a third phase there. So we don't anticipate building all this at once. So. But anyway, I've got my engineer and architect here, and we'd be glad to answer any questions anybody might have.
Okay. Any questions from the Planning Commission for Mr. Story?
Let me ask one quick
Yes,
question,
yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman. And I'm not sure exactly who should answer this, but on Titan Circle, where it ends in front of Lot 4, I mean, would that need to be a little bit of a cul-de-sac type area, or is it just going to dead end and somebody could possibly have to back up if they didn't realize? May not be a big deal, but.
Yeah, I think they're having to leave that there just to provide driveway to that to that final residential area. I don't know, Rom, I hate to put you on the spot, but it's basically a dead-end street that's going in front of one house. Do you have any recommendation for how that should terminate? Is there any specific thing on how that street would terminate in front of one house?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Ron. I think we need a hammerhead or something there. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and to be clear, we had originally bought several residential lots there on Titan Circle and Wycheck Lane to use as sort of a buffer to our original development, which was a lot more commercially intensive than this, and we planned to, either construct ourselves or sell to somebody who would build single-family homes on Titan Circle and the townhomes on Wycheck Lane. So.
Okay. Any other questions from Mr. Story? Thank you, sir. We'll do the public hearing. We may have other questions resulting from that. Okay. Anybody? I'll open the public hearing at this time. Anybody that'd like to come forward to speak, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Tanya Allen. I live at 3416 Shelbyville Highway, a couple of doors down from the Highfield intersection on 231. I did attend the meeting at the Wilderness Station where the developers did listen to all the concerns involved. As I also run a home-based business there, so I am permitted a certain number of clients coming in to that location as well. My main concern is and I just want to iterate what I've already iterated, is that at 231 you have Palmer Acres subdivision that need to make a left-hand turn out. Also, from Savannah Ridge, there is, and I see a lot being on the main highway, there's a lot of U-turns being done at that intersection because either the backup from the Savannah Ridge light or if they've missed the turn trying to go into Camino Real. Also, back up from Jobi Jackson, there's times that traffic backs up past Highfield, as far as for even with the 2 lanes there, either going to Walmart or accessing Jobi Jackson. For me, myself, my clients, also my neighbors, if we're coming from Walmart, we have to make a U-turn to access our properties. And at the meeting, it was having left turns in, left turns out, and no light. And I have requested to consider to have either right turn in, right turn out only, or to add a light to help with the safety of the residents coming out from Palmer Acres and part of Linford Estates. As far as the layout of the development, as a business owner and as a neighbor, I'm very pleased with it. It has a good variety. They really have put a lot of thought into the design of it, which I appreciate. And they have really communicated, at least at the meetings, in my opinion. That's just my main concern, and to make that clear to please, because there's a lot of wrecks at Kroger that has the same situation at Innsbrook, that has a light and then has a left out, left in, but no, and that, in my opinion, should have been a right turn in, right turn out only. But and this has a lot more traffic with the Walmart and everyone coming from Veterans too. So I greatly appreciate your time, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Anybody else? Nobody? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Whitaker, who would you like to comment on the traffic considerations, Ms. Allen?
Mr. Balachandra, if you please.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. I've reviewed the traffic study. It's a pretty thick document here, and I'm working with the traffic consultants here on the intersection of Highfield and the proposed main entrance to this development off South Church Street. Right now, the signal spacing, it does not meet our signal spacing requirements because there is a signal at Savannah Ridge and there is a signal at Jobi Jackson. The distance is about 800. We would like somewhere in about 1,300 to 1,500 feet between signals for progression between signals. But we are studying these numbers to see how to deal with an unsignalized intersection on a major roadway like that with high-speed median divided. So I'm struggling with it. We are working. The developer is willing to work with us with this traffic study and the recommendation from the traffic study. Ultimately, the Tennessee Department of Transportation has to approve a signal if we go that route. But that's something that we will work through during the site plan and final approval of this project.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Balachandra? Thank you, sir. Okay, Planning Commission, any questions for Mr. Story or his engineer? Looks like a very nice development, Mr. Story. I know you've worked on it a long time. There's no questions. We're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion to approve subject to all staff comments.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. The next public hearing is annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 9.65 acres located along Osborne Lane. Vaughn and Geraldine Powers and Green Trails LLC is the applicants. Mr. Blomley, good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb and members of the Planning Commission. Our next item is an annexation petition and plan of services for the area that's colored in blue on the map before you. So the area is right here. It's the Powers property. There are currently 2 single-family residences on the property. It totals 9.5 acres. And there's a second component to the annexation. There's a 10-foot strip of the Valley Brook tract. If you follow my cursor, we had to actually leave out the 10-foot strip on the Valley Brook tract because the Powers property was in the county. So we left out that 10-foot strip to keep the Powers property from being completely surrounded by the city limits. And so now that the Powers have requested annexation, feel that it's appropriate to go ahead and annex that 10-foot strip as well. And so the owner/developer of the Valley Brook development has submitted an annexation petition for that 10-foot strip. As we annex and have more and more 10-foot strips, staff will try to be diligent about making sure that when we have the opportunity, we'll try to get those 10-foot strips and bring them into the city. Ultimately, that's the desire of the property owner. Certainly, the developer of Valley Brook doesn't want to have his development in two jurisdictions, and so I think this is bringing it in line with what his original request is. But the meat of the zoning request, the 9.5 acres located along Osborne Lane, is for all intents and purposes surrounded by the city limits, if not for that 10-foot strip. So the total study area with both the parcel on Osborne and the 10-foot strip is 9.65 acres. No right-of-way is included in this annexation petition and annexation study because the right-of-way of Osborne Lane is already located in the city limits. As I mentioned, written petitions have been received from the two property owners. The parcels are located within the city's urban growth boundary, and they are contiguous with the existing city limits. The plan of services is included in your agenda materials, and it indicates that the city will be able to provide services to the subject property upon annexation. And with that being said, I did want to point out, especially for those in the audience, that there are two public hearings that pertain to this property. This is just specifically for the annexation. The next public hearing after this will be for the zoning, and we received a number of calls on the zoning request, and I'll have additional comments on the zoning, but this particular public hearing is just for the annexation of the Powers property and that 10-foot strip, bringing it into the city limits. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. The Planning Commission does need to conduct a public hearing and then formulate a recommendation to the council regarding the annexation petition and plan of services.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Blomley? Thank you, sir. Okay, for the annexation request, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to have comments pertaining to the annexation request. Nobody? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Questions from the Planning Commission?
There are none. I'll make a motion we approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next public hearing is the zoning application for approximately 12.6 acres located along Osborne Lane to be rezoned from RS12 to RS10, approximately 3.9 acres to be zoned RS10 simultaneous with annexation, and approximately 0.15 acres to be zoned PRD simultaneous with annexation. Randy Friedson is the applicant. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. This property that we're considering for zoning is the same property that we just considered for annexation, and then some additional property as well. If you'll follow me on the cursor here, the Powers property is the property that is in purple and in hatched orange here. And then the Conway property is the property that is labeled RS12, directly adjacent to the Ridgeport subdivision here. The Conway property was annexed into the city and zoned RS12 back in 2015, and it has not developed since then. Mr. Friedson has a contract on that property, as well as the rear 3.9 acres of the Powers tract, and has requested that the Conway property, which is 12.6 acres, be rezoned from RS12 to RS10, and the back 3.9 acres of the Powers property to be rezoned to RS10 simultaneous with annexation. That would mean that it would be a total of 16.5 acres approximately that is proposed to be zoned RS10. Staff estimates that with an RS10 zoning classification, the maximum number of lots that could be developed would be approximately 50 to 55. The purple area, which is about the front 60% of the Powers property, there's no simultaneous zoning request on that property. Believe the Powers intend to continue living there, so they would be annexed in with an interim zoning classification of RS15. And the final component of this zoning request is for the 10-foot strip to be zoned PRD, so that it can be the same zoning as the Valley Brook subdivision upon its annexation. The surrounding zonings and land use classifications to the west is, as I mentioned, the Ridgeport subdivision, which is zoned RS12. To the south is the Hampton subdivision, which is zoned RS12. To the east is an undeveloped tract, large tract with a couple of single-family homes on it, I believe, that's zoned RS12. Further to the east is property that earlier this year was zoned RS12 and RS10. That's directly adjacent to the Meadow Hills or Meadowwood subdivision. To the north is the Valley Brook subdivision, which is zoned PRD, which has 6,000, 8,000, and 11,000, I believe, square foot lots, as well as a one-story condo development, age-targeted condo development. And then to the northwest is the Reserve subdivision, which is zoned RS12. The future land use map in the Murfreesboro 2035 comprehensive plan, which was adopted on July the 12th, and now that this has been adopted, we are going to be making sure that we provide the Planning Commission with a copy of the map and the legend and an explanation of of how the property relates to the future land use map and the comprehensive plan, as this is going to be an important tool in zoning decisions. So the subject property is recommended by the future land use map that it develop as suburban residential. That's the category that is recommended. Suburban residential, with respect to our current zoning classifications, is it says that RS 10, 12, and 15 are consistent with the suburban residential classification. So in that regard, the RS10 zoning classification is consistent with the recommendations of the 2035 future land use map. One thing that I wanted to mention before, a couple things actually that I wanted to mention before we open the public hearing, is that staff had an error in getting the mailouts out to the adjacent property owners. We sent mailouts out, however, we didn't notify, or on the list of property owners were not all the property owners that should have been notified within the 250-foot radius. I believe that the 250-foot radius was made around the Powers property instead of around both the Powers property and the Conway property. So a number of property owners in the Ridgeport subdivision to the west were not notified, and they brought that to our attention today. I know we got a number of calls from the residents in Ridgeport, and I think maybe a few of them will be here today. I know several that I spoke to were out of town and were not able to attend. Our zoning ordinance does state that failure to notify by mail does not invalidate a recommendation of the Planning Commission. And we do need to go ahead and hold the public hearing. I know that we had some folks ask if we could hold the public hearing today with the mailouts not having been delivered to everybody within the 250 feet. But we did post the legal notice in the Murfreesboro Post as well as on our website, and we put a sign on the property. So the public hearing has been advertised, and so we do need to go ahead and conduct the public hearing tonight. I did get a couple of emails that I passed out to you before the meeting, so I'd like to just read the names into the record. There's an email from Ms. Lauren Johnson at 2940 Frank Robinson Drive, and an email from Mr. and Mrs. Adam and Andrea McCartney at 757 Bud Court. And with that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing. And of course, the Planning Commission will need to formulate a recommendation to the City Council.
Of course, if this is approved tonight and sent on to the City Council will hold another public hearing, so they would have an opportunity for those that can't be here tonight would have an opportunity to attend that.
Yes, sir.
Any questions from Mr. Blomley? Thank you, sir. In that case, I'll open the public hearing for this matter. Ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Blomley. I appreciate you mentioning the email we sent out earlier. My name is Lauren Johnson, 2940 Frank Robinson Drive. I actually own 2 properties within the Ridgeport subdivision and was uninformed at all until I just happened to have a neighbor talk to me today, in which case I reached out to Mr. Blomley as fast as possible. A lot of our subdivision HOA, we are a close-knit group. We have regular meetings where we get together not only for the planning of the subdivision, but also for just camaraderie and unity within the subdivision. And there is a long list of people who would like to be here tonight who are unfortunately out of town. I'll let Adam address some of the people that mentioned. I did reach out to Mr. Blomley today and ask first and foremost that the committee consider deferring their decision tonight so we can have a true representation. The last time the proposal came before this committee, we were notified via our mailboxes, and we were able to make decisions of whether we wanted to attend this hearing or not. And so this is a second go-around for some of us. Mr. Blomley said that there is a sign posted outside of the property. However, if you drive down Memorial and you live in Ridgeport subdivision, you probably don't cross in front of that property on Osborne Lane. So the signage is irrelevant to us. It would have been really appreciated if the planning committee could have even maybe put a sign in front of our property and said, hey, we're thinking about annexing the property behind you that touches your property. So we do ask that you consider the deferment just for that extreme. I mentioned the last time I was here about the green zone barrier. I applaud Mr. Story, who was just here before us, and his willing to sit down with the people within the existing community to talk to them about the planning of the development that's going right beside them. Our investment in our homes is a major investment, and our investment in Murfreesboro is as well, and so we ask that you consider that. So a green zone barrier, if we do move forward, we request it to leave existing tree lines wherever possible to develop Murfreesboro as a whole with more greenery. If we move forward tonight, we're asking that you consider maintaining the wildlife that exists in this habitat. Both the property right beside Ridgeport and the Powers property host abundant life, deer, hawks, many butterflies and birds, rabbits, turkey. They all live in this little area of wood that's left that has not been developed in North Murfreesboro. So we ask that you consider that. There is a conservation site that was developed, the Tennessee Swamp, and you referenced that in the email, and my understanding is you all have a copy of that. The proposal for the lot size, even Mr. Blomley was discussing, the subdivisions around this particular now annexed into Murfreesboro City is all RS-12 or RS-15. To include the multitude of houses you're talking about in RS-10 would endanger a lot of traffic situations, which is another topic of discussion. But most importantly, it just continues to devalue our investments. We lost Siegel High School as our high school from the date of purchase. Memorial Boulevard has been commercialized from what it was before. We have a gas station at the end of our Osborne Street now, instead of right beside it, the development of a building like Wilson Bank and Trust. So we're watching our investments diminish. I personally actually own 3 pieces of property, just from Memorial to Emory, so straight down Osborne. So I have serious concerns about putting in another neighborhood that is a multiple unit without any greenery, without any consideration for brick, stone, mortar versus siding. So we're asking that the Planning Commission take all this into consideration. I love that Mr. Story reached out to the people that he's going to be building beside, and I encourage this new developer to do the same thing. We get it. Murfreesboro is growing, but we want to also take into consideration those of us that have called it home for a long time. The first right of option, perhaps, to buy the adjacent properties. If you're going to build beside me, I'd like to perhaps at least have an opportunity to look at buying that tract of land. The traffic concerns, you know it. When you drive down Osborne, ask the people who live there. They lose their mailboxes on a regular basis.
Ms. Johnson.
I'm sorry. Okay. I also include an alternative idea, so maybe it's not a development. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Anybody else?
My name is Adam McCartney. I live at 757 Bud Court. And I'd like to speak on behalf of my wife. She is on a work trip this afternoon down in Florida. So she unfortunately couldn't be here with us as well. Some of the things that have been a big concern for us is just what Lauren was saying is the green zone barrier. We'd like to keep the remaining trees if possible. That really makes it a part of our community. Especially in my backyard, I can see all the green trees. I'd like to see that, and that's a big part of why we purchased the land we did. The second thing we'd really like to mention also is the RD12 to RD10. I'm sorry, RS12 to RS10. Being the area that we have, we really like the Osborne Lane area because of the size of houses, the size of lots that are in that area. We like to keep the building material, the brick, mortar. We really like that territory. We used to live over in a different area that was south of town that had a lot more the vinyl siding and a different price range. I get that. I understand that part. But we really like that area up here in Osborne Lane, and that's why we chose that area. So we'd like to maintain that property consistency throughout this area. And the second thing we want to talk to you about is, again, just the traffic concerns. Osborne, we do appreciate having a 3-lane road through there. It does have an option to turn off, which is very safe, and we appreciate that. But just keep it in concerns as well when you're making this. I would just ask that we can defer this until everybody has a chance to be present.
Thank you, Mr. McCartney.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Maurice Vanderbilt. I'm at 746 Matt Court, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I didn't know anything about the development that's happening, and I initially found out I was getting off work yesterday, and I saw the developer, he was talking to one of the neighbors, and I was going in, and he's like, hey. So I went over, he had this conversation, and, we were talking. So, hey, he introduced himself. I'm the builder, I'm the developer, and about 2 minutes into the conversation, I'm going to build 52 lots in here, and the reason I'm building 52 lots is because what I paid for the lots, I have to be profitable, and this is why I have to put 52 lots in there. So me as a citizen of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, Rutherford County, if I'm having a developer that's going to put a property adjacent to my property, because I stay in the cul-de-sac right back there, so the fence line is right up against where they're going to develop. So me as a homeowner right there, I want a developer that's going to be such as Mr. Story, that's going to come in and it's going to build something that's going to be comparable to what I'm staying at. That's just let me know that the developer does not have the best interest of the people that's living right next to him. His main concern was, I have to build 52 lots to be profitable to what I built the lots on. So come to me and have a real conversation with me as far as why we're building these properties. Don't come to me as far as like I'm building the properties because I need to be profitable, and that's why I have 52 lots in there. And that was my question, and that was the response I got. So that's all I have to say, but really, defer. I'm asking you all to deny, but defer. If you all approve, I'd ask you to really kind of defer to all of the people of Ridgeport subdivision could come in and actually have a voice.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
My name is David Schaefer. I live at 2918 Frank Robinson. We moved there about 7 or 8 months ago, and we love the neighborhood. It is truly a neighborhood where people have come together and live in harmony, and we know our neighbors. We also made a significant investment in this neighborhood. We did live in Prim Springs. We moved over to this neighborhood. We made a significant investment in this neighborhood because of the way that the area looked. It looks nice. There's beautiful houses with brick and mortar, and the area is very well maintained generally. What we have noticed over the 6 or 8 months that we've lived there is, as she said, the significant number of mailboxes that are littering the road because of the excess amount of traffic and the speed going down there. To add 55 more houses in an area that was originally built for or generated for R12 seems a little bit of a stretch to me. And as I'm learning now, to only add that number of properties because it needs to be profitable, perhaps the gentleman or the person that's looking at that property should consider another area that could be profitable and have it zoned correctly to go with the rest of the neighborhood. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Anybody else?
Hello, I'm Daryl Bowles. I live at 2932 Frank Robinson Drive. And I think that one of the key reasons why I wanted to come here tonight, in particular to the Planning Commission, is as we're looking at the 35 plans for the future of Murfreesboro, I often think of Osborne Lane as being one of the key areas within our city that really needs to be looked at and evaluated for what this commission or what this committee would do for the future development. We have a significant amount of land down this road. We have a significant amount of houses and residents down this road. And I think at this point, as we look over the last, I think roughly 15 years, we've only had RS-12 or larger lots built on Osborne Lane. I believe it's been more than 2 decades that we've had since a zoning request has come through or approved for RS-10. I think one of the significant issues here is that the amount of traffic that will continue to come down Osborne Lane, if we start to see a trend that if our future development of this area is at the smaller area, that the amount of traffic will overburden this area. It already has some issue on the west side over on the Emery Lane. Quite possibly there should be some traffic studies at this point on that side of Osborne Lane, because there definitely are some traffic considerations at that point. One of the areas or ideas that hasn't been discussed today by the other members is RS-10 in these sliver of lots in the size that they are will most likely or more than likely either only allow for front load garage or very tight quarter side entry garages that will be very difficult to be utilized. So the lot size on these, the width, is at the very minimum. And by this, the individuals that will border this property will not have one house, not 2, not 3, but 4.5 on average houses behind them, which in that will eliminate, especially 2-story, which I'm sure there will need to be to meet square footage minimums. 2-story will eliminate most of their views of any greenage behind their property. I think this is a significant issue for this committee to take a look at rather than move forward, because for Osborne Lane, I think we really need to have a comprehensive plan for what we're going to do with future developments in that area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
Hello, Lori Schaefer, 2918 Frank Robinson Drive. I would just like to second the comments made by my neighbors in the Ridgeport subdivision, but I also would just ask this council to please either deny or defer this evening so that others can represent based on the notice. Agreeing that, yes, a sign was apparently posted, but as Lauren had stated, if you don't travel down that way, likewise, Murfreesboro Post, just in terms of delivery. So I would ask that you either deny that R10 development or defer for greater notification and representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. Anybody else? Nobody? Okay, so I'll close the public hearing. Any comments by the staff?
Yeah, if you'd like, I could just go through. Sure. Go through the items. Several of the residents mentioned a buffer or preservation of the existing vegetation. Looked at an aerial photo. It looks like the tree line is actually set off of the adjoining property line a little bit, so it may be difficult to protect that tree line. Usually, when a developer can protect a tree line is when the tree line is on the property line. I just glanced at an aerial photo earlier. As far as wildlife, that's a comment that we hear at our public hearings, and really as staff, I don't know that we can really address that issue. It's something that wildlife as development occurs will be displaced, and I think that's probably something that we see all over town. With respect to building materials, whether it's zoned RS12 or RS10, we don't control the building materials. With the Hamptons or with Ridgeport, if the city didn't control their building materials, if they were built with vinyl, if they were built with brick, if they were built with hardy board, they were zoned a traditional bulk residential zoning classification. The developers chose to record covenants that regulated the building materials. I would assume that Mr. Friedsam would record covenants and regulate the building materials here. What exactly those building material requirements would be, I don't know. But whether it's RS12, which is the current zoning, or RS10, which is the proposed zoning, we don't regulate the building materials. As far as the lot sizes, if the entire property were zoned RS12, I would predict a maximum of 40 to 45 lots. If it were zoned RS10, I would predict a maximum of 50 to 55 lots, so roughly a 10-lot increase. As far as, as far as traffic, Osborne Lane was rebuilt about 10 years ago, and I consulted with Mr. Balachandra, our traffic engineer, and it still has capacity. It's not near capacity at the moment. As far as whether to defer the request, that's certainly the Planning Commission can either make a recommendation to approve, make a recommendation to deny, or defer action on the request. With regards to requesting a zoning to make a profitable development, developers are in the business. It's their profession to try to find a way to make a living. And so, almost every zoning request we get is a developer with an idea of how he wants to use the land, and he has the right to come in and request rezoning. And that's the same with any development. That's not unusual. The future of Osborne Lane, area, they're correct. There are a number of undeveloped tracts on Osborne Lane. We saw a zoning request and an annexation request for the Throneberry property here, and it is going to be developed. We're going to be seeing a development plan for that in the near future. It was zoned to RS12 and RS10 back earlier this year. The gentleman mentioned that most of the area was RS12. There is a substantial amount of RS12 in the area, but smaller lot sizes are not unprecedented in the area. As I mentioned, to the north, there's the Valley Brook, which are 6, 8, 11s, minimum lot sizes, and then the RS12 and the RS10. And further to the east, there's the Meadowwood subdivision, which is zoned RS10, 12, and 15. But they're correct. There is a great deal of RS12 in the area. With regards to front entry garages, that I would say that's likely correct. The minimum lot width in the RS12 and the RS10 zone is 65 feet. Now that's a minimum. He could choose to develop wider lots and wide enough to accommodate a side entry garage. The minimum lot width in the RS12 zone is 5 feet greater at 70 feet. So these are minimums. They can choose to develop larger lots. They can choose to develop wider lots. But the RS10 zone sets the minimums. So when they submit a subdivision plat, we would be looking to make sure they met those minimum requirements. As I mentioned, staff is regretful about the error with regards to the notification. That was something that was brought to our attention, and as soon as it was brought to Mr. Whitaker's attention this morning, he got to the bottom of it, and it was an error on staff's part, and it was totally inadvertent. It was not on purpose that was made, and every person who's called, I've tried to apologize and let them know that was inadvertent on staff's part.
Any questions from members of the Planning Commission?
Mr. Blomley, can you just, if you have looked at or remember, how many acres is the Ridgeport subdivision? Do you remember?
Just eyeballing it, I would say that the Ridgeport subdivision is fairly comparable to the subject property. It's wider than the Conway tract and a little bit deeper. And so by adding the 3.9 acres, I'd say it's roughly comparable.
Mr. Chairman.
Sir.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to do two things. I'd like to make the motion to approve, but before Eddie and myself, before council, I'd like for the developer to have a meeting with this neighborhood. So my motion is to approve for what we're doing tonight, but also before this goes to council, that the developer makes an honest effort to meet with these homeowners.
Okay. Motion is made. Is there a second?
I'd just like to make a comment. I agree with Kurt's thought process, but we have admittedly not notified as what we should have done. I think out of all transparency that we ought to have the ability, or they have the right for the people to come to a public hearing at this level that weren't notified. And I'm of the opinion, and I may be in the minority here, but that we ought to defer and allow the people that weren't notified have the opportunity to come speak. And if there's no more that come speak, at least we were very transparent in our actions.
State law, Mr. Ives, does not require public hearing at the Planning Commission level for this type of proposal, does it?
It does not.
It's my inclination that the city of Murfreesboro has always been very transparent in everything they do. I certainly understand the regret that the staff has that an inadvertent omission as far as the notification went. But as far as I'm concerned, there's plenty of opportunity to have an appropriate neighborhood meeting and then a public hearing at the city council level where it will go regardless. So I would be supportive of Mr. Wade's motion.
I think the precedent has been set in the past that we usually go above and beyond what's expected, and that's the reason we have a public hearing, and that's the reason we try to notify the neighbors. But we have at least met the minimum standard which we're required to do, and I think gone beyond that because we've had a public hearing. Everyone who would be interested in speaking and having the next level of approval, if they would like to speak to them, the opportunity is still there if they would like to come and speak to the council. I think that a lot of questions could be answered in a neighborhood meeting, and I think that's the more important part here is to so many issues can be addressed with just a good explanation of why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'll assure you that there's not a developer in Murfreesboro who's not developing with intentions of trying to make a profit. That's not unique to this developer. It might not be the right thing to say when you're developing next to someone who opposes it, but it's the truth. The other reality is the comment that was made about the animals and stuff that are on this property. If you live next door to this property, when your house was built, your property had animals on it too. And the same comments were probably made when your neighborhood was developed. So there is the common thing as we extend developments that we continually hear the same comments, and it's generally made by the people who have just done the same thing, which was come to the neighborhood and built a new development. I agree with Kurt. I think the opportunity is there for everyone to come and speak. If everyone in the neighborhood wants to come and speak, I'll assure you the city council will sit and listen and take notes and show interest that will exemplify that they're doing what's best for the city, whether they agree with you or don't agree with you. But we know that this property will be developed at some point. It's no question about, if it's going to develop, it will. Any place that you see a lot along Osborne Lane, you're probably going to see a development. Will that increase the traffic? Honest answer is yes. I'm probably not telling everybody exactly what they want to hear. I'm assuming I'm not, but I'm being completely honest with you. And I would if Kurt has made yours in the form of a motion, I'll second Kurt's motion.
Motion has been made and seconded to recommend approval to the city council with the stipulation that the developer hold a neighborhood meeting prior to the next
council meeting.
Public hearing at the council level. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No.
Motion carries. There will be a public hearing at the city council level, but I do want to thank you guys for coming out tonight, and hopefully the neighborhood meeting will go a long way in answering a lot of questions on this for you. Okay. The next public hearing tonight is a zoning application for approximately 7 acres located along Manson Pike to be rezoned from RS 15 to commercial fringe. Chad Meadow is the applicant. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. The subject property is located along the south side of Manson Pike. It's approximately 7 acres located just to the east of I-840. The property is currently developed. Only about a quarter of it is developed with an existing church. The property used to be owned by Blackman United Methodist Church and was recently purchased by Mr. Meadow and his family. Mr. Meadow owns the property, and his family own the property directly to the west here. That's zoned commercial highway and commercial fringe. Fronts on Blackman Road, but has a very, very small piece of frontage on Blackman Road. The main purpose in purchasing this 7 acres where the church is located is for the potential of packaging that 7 acres with the larger 53-acre property to the west to afford it access onto Manson Pike, just because of the very little opportunity for access on the balance of the property. So that's the primary reason. The property was given an interim zoning classification of RS15 several years ago, and the existing church is still being leased out, even though the applicant has purchased it. They're continuing to lease it from the applicant. If it's rezoned to commercial fringe as it is proposed, the church would continue to be a conforming use. Churches are permitted by right in the commercial fringe zone. So this would be a continuation of the strip of commercial fringe that makes up the eastern portion. I think it's about 250-foot wide strip of commercial fringe on the eastern side of Mr. Meadows' property to the west. Directly to the east of the subject property is a PRD that was originally called Maddington Park, but it is has changed names to Braxton Park. Mr. Alcorn had that zoned PRD, and he has since sold it to Landmark Homes, and Landmark Homes is moving forward with the development of that townhouse development. To the south and to the south east of the subject property is zoned RS12, and that's the Oakton, Princeton Oaks, and Blackman Meadows subdivisions. Across the street, across Manson Pike, is I-840, and this is right next to the bridge on Manson Pike that goes over I-840. The future land use map of the Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan, adopted by the Planning Commission on July 12th, recommends that the subject property develop as suburban residential. The CF zoning proposed is not consistent with the plan. However, because the existing property to the east and west, one being a townhome development zone PRD to the east and a commercial highway, commercial fringe property to the west, it appears that this property may be appropriate to deviate from the recommendations of the future land use map, but of course that'll be up to the Planning Commission and City Council. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing and then formulate a recommendation for City Council. And I believe Mr. Roundtree is here representing Mr. Meadow if you have any questions for him.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Blomley or Mr. Roundtree? If not, I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Nobody? Okay. I'll close the public hearing. Any questions or comments from members of the Planning Commission? If not, we're ready for a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item F is a zoning application for approximately 74 acres to amend the Kimbrough Woods PRD for approximately 8.91 acres located along Veterans Parkway to be rezoned from RS15 to PRD Kimbrough Woods PRD. Kimbrough Development Group, LLC is the applicant. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. Subject property is the existing Kimbrough Woods PRD, which is located along the west side of St. Andrews Drive, a little bit north of Veterans Parkway. It's the property colored in purple on the map before you. The northern half of this development has moved forward with construction since it was adopted, since the PRD was adopted back in 2005. The original developer, I believe, developed the first 2 sections, and then during the recession, he exited the picture, and Mr. Smith and his company have purchased the property and have been developing the meadows at Kimbrough Woods on the subject property. As Mr. Smith and his design engineer, Huddleston Steel, have been reviewing the future development of the property, they have come to us wanting to make some changes to the existing plan to better fit their vision for the property. As you are well aware, over the last 4 or 5 years since we've come out of the recession, many original developers are no longer associated with projects, and new developers have taken over and are attempting to kind of re-energize existing developments, and that's what Mr. Smith is trying to do. The existing Kimbrough Woods PRD consists of 283 homes on approximately 74 acres for a density of 3.8 dwelling units per acre. The proposed plan calls for 314 homes on approximately 83 acres, but the density would remain the same because a component to this is the addition of 8.9 acres into the PRD. You can see the area fronting on Veterans Parkway that is currently zoned RS15 and is in the orange color. They would like to add that to the Kimbrough Woods PRD. This would allow them to get additional lots as well as an access onto Veterans Parkway. The existing Kimbrough Woods PRD only has one way in and one way out, and that's the existing entrance on Genoa Drive on St. Andrews Drive. So the existing entrance is right here. This would afford the opportunity for another way in and out of the development and would direct traffic onto traffic that now only has the option of going onto St. Andrews Drive, would now have the option of going onto Veterans Parkway. The original zoning plan did not specify a minimum lot size, but most of the lots in my research were at least 7,000 square feet. The amendment seeks to codify a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet. And the current plan calls for the exterior materials of the homes to be a minimum of 60% masonry. The applicant is proposing to increase that percentage to 100% to include brick, stone, and fiber cement siding. Vinyl will be allowed only in the trim and soffit. The current plan requires that certain lots have side entry garages, but the proposal will remove that requirement and allow for all homes to have front entry garages. The minimum required home size is currently 1,400 square feet, and that's not proposed to change. The applicant does propose to modify the setbacks, and this was at staff's request. The existing front setback is 25 feet, but with the applicant going to all front entry garages, we want to make sure that all the driveways can accommodate 4 cars, and we know we need a 35-foot setback to the face of the garage to accommodate 4 cars in the driveway. So in addition to the 2-car garage, there will be a 35-foot front setback on all homes, which would enable the parking of 4 cars in the driveway. The surrounding land uses include a number of single-family residential subdivisions. To the north is the Bellhaven and Bell Reeve subdivisions, which are zoned RS12. To the east, across St. Andrews Drive, is the Southern Meadows PRD, which has a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. There are 3 estate lots in the county that I think are about 5 acres, located at the northwest corner of Veterans Parkway and St. Andrews Drive. Across Veterans Parkway is the Sheffield Park subdivision, which has 8, 10, and 12,000 square foot lots. And to the west of the subject property is the Weston Park subdivision, which has a variety of lot sizes, some less than 6,000 square feet, others going up to greater than 12,000 square feet. The future land use map contained in the Murfreesboro 2035 comprehensive plan, which I erroneously put in my staff comments, has not yet been adopted. As you know, it has been adopted because you all voted on it. Recommends that the subject property develop as auto-urban residential, and the proposed density and lot sizes are consistent with the recommendations of the comprehensive plan. Mr. Clyde Roundtree has a PowerPoint presentation that he would like to give you regarding the proposed development and the amendments.
Let's see here. First of all, thank you, Matthew, for the introduction. My name is Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. Chairman Lamb, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to present this project to you. I'm here with Mr. Smith, the developer. If you have any specific questions for him, he'd be glad to answer those as well. Let me just walk you through. Matthew does a great job kind of doing the introduction, so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time reiterating what he's already said, but just in a nutshell, as we mentioned, 8.93 acres is going to be added. The key to that component is that it's going to provide us access to Veterans Parkway, a huge enhancement to the subdivision, something that makes the city very happy to have that secondary access, so that's a key point. And as Matthew mentioned, the density is not changing. We're already adding a few more homes because the lot sizes are decreasing to 6,000 square foot minimum, but really the overall density is going to stay the same, and that was important for Mr. Smith as well. We are removing the side entry garages just because the width of the lots will not really encourage side entry garages. But working with the staff and with Mr. Smith, the staff asked us to go ahead, since we were reducing the lot size, to go ahead and move up the masonry percentage to 100% masonry, and Mr. Smith was more than willing to do that. So those are some of the high points, and as Matthew mentioned, we're going to have an increased front setback to accommodate parking since there will be front entry garages. I think of note, because of the folks that are here tonight, around it is really planned development for the most part around this particular site. However, if you notice in that bottom right corner, there's 3 lots that are in the county. I think everyone from those lots are here tonight. And just to kind of bring that up, the top lot, really right up adjacent to the major property line, you'll see in the presentation, but we've worked closely with that particular landholder. He's here tonight, and trying to make sure there's a lot of concern over an existing tree line that's established. And Mr. Smith's done some proactive things to try to make sure that that tree line stays intact. So we've already been proactive to try to help alleviate some of their concerns. And there's your site. Again, adjacent uses, you can see on the bottom portion where the RS-12 is, that's a highly dense area of vegetation. A lot of that is going to be used for drainage. Some of the catalysts on this reorganization of the master plan was a result of some of the drainage allocations being enlarged. So Mr. Smith had to make some adjustments and lost some property as a result of kind of redefining the floodplain. So that was kind of a response of what kind of catalyzed some of the actions we've taken, as well as that secondary access point. The lot, in essence, is an open pasture land for the most part, except for the new section is wooded. It's fairly level and open land. The existing homes, as mentioned before, this is what they look like with 60% masonry. So you can see in the images on the top corner, there's stone. On the right top, that's brick, and then on the bottom portion, that's more of a siding type of home. But they're attractive homes. They'll be very comparable in scale with the new development. The existing master plan, as Matthew mentioned, that black line really delineates where the new parameters are going to be set. At that black line and south of that is really where all the new criteria are taking place that were mentioned before. And this shows you the overall master plan. Really, the orange lots are really basically denoting the new lots, as well as all that greenery below. That's showing where the drainage area is. And then off to the right, you can see how along St. Andrews, that's where the drainage area had been expanded, where previously there had been houses slated. D.R. Horton is the builder of the homes. He'll remain the builder of the homes. Again, the biggest difference there is just the fact that we're going to increase the masonry requirement. And as was mentioned, Mr. Smith, working with the neighbors, at least their concerns, that's that tree line that's on that one of the southern boundaries. There are 3 lots there that we pulled out of the overall master plan in order to accommodate some green space, but that was also to try to alleviate some of the pressure that adjacent landowner was feeling. His house, as you can see, is kind of right where it says neighborhood playground. His house is outlined. So that existing tree line is well established. That will stay intact. And in lieu of having homes there, we're going to go ahead and have an amenity area. That'll basically be a playground, some parking, and a bench. And with that in mind, a brief presentation, but I'm available for any questions you may have, and thank you for the opportunity to present.
Chairman Lamb, if I'd just like to get a acknowledgement from Mr. Roundtree that I forwarded an email from our Water and Sewer Department with regards to how this property will need to be sewered, and I just wanted to get a confirmation from you that you and your client received that and understand.
We have. Thanks, Matthew.
Okay. Any questions from Mr. Roundtree? Thank you, sir. Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
Thank you.
What page do you need?
Just the one that shows all the adjoining properties. I think it's what was sent out on the flyer. I'm not sure. Timothy Kelly, 3338 St. Andrews Drive. Just got a few quick things. First of all, a big thank you to what everybody planning and engineering has done. Some of them are here in the room. Some of them aren't speaking a lot and being quiet, but The drainage issues that we've had since I've been at this property for 20 years have been tremendous. The water used to run about an inch deep and about a half-mile wide. It was slow draining, forever wet, mosquito-ridden. And since Sheffield Park and the LGI subdivision, which is West Wind, since the engineering plans have gone in place there, we've got retention ponds, detention ponds, channel draining. The water's moving out, and it's moving out quick. And I only hope it'll get better with what we do with this redirection of the water here. Just real quickly, there's a flood hazard area that goes basically from my property line all the way to Southern Meadows. It's the current mapping is so incorrect, and everybody's aware of it, and I think everybody's working on it. But it would be my hope as part of all this that the existing homes that are in the subject development now, which will be Kimbrough Woods, there's 3 or 4 streets there that are far removed from where water might go, that have been in the flood zone. There's letters of map removal, map revision that are in place. I wish we could just get all that redrawn and not have to worry about all those individual letters for all those individual lots. And that includes across the street in Southern Meadows also. Those don't affect me. That's just something I wanted to have as a point of record. The entrance to the subdivision on the change we're talking about now, as it comes onto Veterans Parkway, there's currently a median there in the middle. It's a grassy area, and it's in the middle of a curve. I would just ask that there be some consideration as far as the sight lines go. There's some very high speeds out there at certain times of the evening, and I think it would be worth considering to try to line it up with the existing part of the 5-lane road now, where there is no median, but there's actually 5 lanes. There's a turning lane that already goes to Sheffield Park. One other concern, and it's not for myself because I already have access to Veterans Parkway on the back of my property, but for the 2 adjoining lots that are beside me, I've talked with at least one of the homeowners about the potential for connectivity to the new subdivision road that is going to extend to Veterans Parkway. Depending on the changes in the flood zone, there is a possibility that there's about 8 acres right there that might not have a lot of use for future use. And 8 acres in this area at some point in time will become very valuable. It may be nice. It's not my decision. It may be nice if somebody would consider the potential economic impact of having access to another road and not having to put a bridge in over a flood hazard area that already exists. Okay. That's basically everything I have. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Anybody else? Nobody? Last call. I see. Don't be shy.
My name's Steve Jensen, 3310 St. Andrews. I'm the guy that has that long frontage sideline. I just wanted to go on record and say that I'm pleased with some of the changes that they've made. My property is this nice 5-acre oasis in the trees, and this development is coming right up to the sideline, and there's an existing tree line there. We talked to the developer about it. He made some changes with that playground area, and I want to say thank you for that. And if we can keep that existing tree line as a buffer, because it is right next to my house, and so I was glad and pleased to see the changes. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. Anybody else? Okay, seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Blomley or anybody on the staff, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm scrolling through the book to see if Mr. Roundtree mentioned, I know that he mentioned a type A buffer along Mr. Jensen's property line, wanting to make sure that the language is in there with regards to to keeping the, oh yes, he says type A buffer in conjunction with existing vegetation and preserve existing tree line. So that's codified in the plan, and so I think he's making that commitment.
Good. Mr. Jensen, you heard that, I hope. Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, we're ready for a motion. Sir.
Chairman, there's a long history on the drainage, and you would let Mr. Huddleston just a snippet of that, if that'd be okay.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb, Sam Huddleston, City Engineering Department. Just a quick update. Mr. Kelly mentioned the flood study. This is Spence Creek, or at least the floodplain of Spence Creek, even though the area on this side of St. Andrews Drive is mostly dry. And his wish to get an updated, redrawn map, we're working on it. We started, the City Council funded a flood study of Spence Creek some 3 years ago, and we have that in the very final details, getting ready to submit it to FEMA for review. I'm hopeful we'll have some information back from FEMA on that in the next 3 to 6 months. We'll change the flood maps there, and so and I think it'll give an overall improvement. What prompted all of the concern there are 2 undersized culverts under St. Andrews Drive, and I think Mr. Kelly and his neighbors that have lived there for some time have witnessed Spence Creek out of its banks over the roads. And so certainly from an access and drainage standpoint, we want to get those things corrected, but we can't correct them until we make sure we don't compromise the floodplain there. And so we had to do a detailed study just to be able to size culverts and determine how to route the water under St. Andrews Drive. So that's an update on the flood study. I'll be glad to answer any questions on that or anything else that was mentioned.
Any questions for Mr. Huddleston? You might as well stick close to the podium because you're going to be up in a few minutes anyway.
Yes, sir. I'll be close by.
Okay, I think we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion we approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Final public hearing tonight is an annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 9 acres located along Cushing Avenue. Rutherford County Government is the applicant. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. Our final public hearing, as you mentioned, is an annexation petition and plan of services for property that the county owns, approximately 9 acres located along the east side of Cushing Avenue, directly across Cushing Avenue from the Oakland Middle ball fields. We met with the county and their design team about a month ago. They have plans for improvements at Oakland Middle School. As you know, there are some portables out there, and they're looking to build a 7th grade wing, and actually be a detached wing where the ball fields are now. And so that would alleviate some of the crowding at Oakland Middle, and that would be that addition would allow for the removal of the portables, but that would displace the existing practice ball fields. But the county does own the property across the street, and it's the property colored in purple, and they do wish to relocate those ball fields onto the undeveloped 9 acres across the street. Both of the components of their improvement plan, both the construction of the new wing on where the ball fields are now, as well as the development of the ball fields on the property across the street, will require a special use permit from the Board of Zoning Appeals, and they'll be moving forward with that request, I believe with an application this month for consideration by the Board of Zoning Appeals. And of course the Board of Zoning Appeals, Mr. Halliburton, you'll be seeing that soon. Any approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals, of course, would be contingent upon the City Council approving the annexation of this property, since the special use permit would occur before the annexation. The schools are on a timeline to get this opened, I believe, by the 18-19 school year, if I'm not mistaken, and so they are moving full speed ahead with this addition. About 0.45 acres of this tract, the tract is 9.45 acres, about 0.45 acres was annexed earlier this year. It is this strip along the southern end of the track. It was annexed in conjunction with the Laurelstone development that fronts on Las Casas Pike. The county will be transferring that property to the developer of the Laurelstone subdivision to provide access back to Cushing Avenue to the east for the Laurelstone development. But the balance of the property, 9 acres, is undeveloped, and that is where the proposed ball fields will go. There will be structures, or at least one structure on the property that will require sanitary sewer, and so that is the primary reason why they have requested annexation for this property, so that they can benefit from sanitary sewer, which is available to the subject property. It'll be a relatively easy parcel to annex. It's surrounded on most sides by the existing city limits, and existing city services are already present in the area, as well as city utilities. No right-of-way is included with the annexation request. The property is contiguous with the existing city limits. The petition has been filed by the property owner, and it is within the city's urban growth boundary. The plan of services is included in your agenda materials. Mr. Jeff Hooper with Barge Cawthon and Associates is here representing the county school system, as is Mr. Trey Lee. And if you have any questions for them about their plans for the property. We do anticipate that there will be a neighborhood meeting before the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting later on this month, and I believe Mr. Hooper is organizing that with Ms. Rush in our office, who works with the Board of Zoning Appeals, because we know that this is adjacent to a number of residences. We want to make sure that we involve them on the front end of their planning process. I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing, but we do need to conduct a public hearing on this matter tonight and then formulate a recommendation to the City Council. Okay.
Any questions from Mr. Blomley or the applicant? If not, I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Nobody? Seeing nobody coming forward, I'll close the public hearing. Any questions or comments by members of the Planning Commission? If not, we're ready for a motion.
Move for approval, subject to any and all staff comments.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. The motion carries. That concludes the public hearing portion of our agenda. We'll go into mandatory referrals now. We have 5 listed on their agenda here, and we have a 6th one under staff reports and other business that Mr. Ives snuck in at the last moment there. So we'll start with the mandatory referral, MTSU Miller Coliseum land and easement grants for MTI 8, West Thompson Lane and Cherry Lane Connector Street, located along West Thompson Lane. City of Murfreesboro Engineering Department is the applicant. Mr. Huddleston, good evening again.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb, and we work on long titles for those that have to read the agendas. I'll attempt to cut those short in the future. We are here to talk about a mandatory referral for land and easement grants from the MTSU Miller Coliseum to the City of Murfreesboro. Mandatory referral is an item we refer to the Planning Commission, which includes any real estate decisions by the City of Murfreesboro. And that's why we have the unusual title there, but this is a real estate decision. We'll be accepting easements and land grants on behalf of the city. MTI 8 is Midterm Improvement 8 from our 2025 Major Thoroughfare Plan. It is a connector street between Cherry Lane and Thompson Lane, running along the on the west side of Miller Coliseum. A few months back, the developer of Caroline Farms requested annexation and rezoning of 25 acres for a residential development, and included elements that touched the Major Thoroughfare Plan. So we applied the requirements of the Major Thoroughfare Plan, who said that the developer needed to participate in the construction and dedicate easements and right-of-way. We originally proposed that roadway, and Matthew, if you could pull up that exhibit, it might help us, but we originally proposed the roadway to run approximately on the west side of the MTSU Miller Coliseum. Through negotiations with Miller Coliseum and the developer of Caroline Farms, we worked out a public-private partnership to shift the roadway to the yellow portion, which is the Caroline Farms master plan. The Miller Coliseum would then be the blue portion, and then I think it's Generals Run, Generals Retreat, one of the
Some general.
some Generals development there. Mr. Wilson is working on in the orange, and so MTI 8 would connect Cherry Lane and Thompson Lane, and the master plan and preliminary plat of Caroline Farms included routing it through the subdivision. There's a portion there that would be required to complete MTI 8 on city property at the Siegel Park. And so through negotiations and discussions with Caroline Farms and MTSU Miller Coliseum, we have developed a plan that would result in shifting the roadway away from Miller Coliseum. Their benefit is that they continue to get a connection to that, which they would like for their development, but it also shifts away from their property, and the roadway is constructed soon. They would benefit from that, so they agreed to donate land and easements to the city to accomplish that purpose. And so we're asking you to approve this mandatory referral to accept that land and easement grant for MTI 8. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Huddleston? Okay, we need a motion for approval, right?
That's correct.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next mandatory referral, Atmos Energy gas line easement for utility relocation for West Lydell Street reconstruction on Rutherford County Health Department, located West Burton, along West Burton Street. City of Murfreesboro Engineering Department is the applicant. Sam.
Thank you again, Chairman Lamb. During the reconstruction of West Lydell Street, things got very tight. Atmos Energy needed to relocate a gas line along West Burton. The city actually owns the Rutherford County Health Department property. That was a part of a Christie Houston grant, Foundation grant condition, and so we're the owners of the real estate there. They've approached us to see if it would be allowable for them to shift the gas line into the green space between the back of our sidewalk and the parking in Rutherford County Health Department. It seems to be a reasonable request, and so we're asking you to approve the city granting the gas line easement for Atmos Energy with two conditions: one, that they provide the city with a legal description, and two, that they pay for the recording fees for the easement documents once prepared and executed. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? No, we're ready for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Item C, mandatory referral, McDonald property purchase for West Park, located along Burton Knob Road and Blackman Road. City of Murfreesboro's applicant. Mr. Huddleston.
And Chairman Lamb, again, a real estate action by the city. We've purchased property there. We need to refer this to the Plan Commission for approval as a mandatory referral. We purchased 123 acres at the Burnt Knob, Blackman Road, Veterans Parkway 840 area, and I recommend your approval of the mandatory referral regarding the McDonald property purchase.
Any questions? Ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to approve.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item D, the mandatory referral for the Richards property purchase for future city projects located along Franklin Road. City of Murfreesboro's applicant. Sam.
Chairman Lamb, a fourth real estate transaction, again, a property purchase. We don't have specific plans for the use of this property. City school, city park, fire station have been mentioned as potential projects. The property purchase is a real estate action by the city, and I recommend your approval of the mandatory referral in reference to the Richards property purchase. Be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions?
So
Not. Ready for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And the mandatory referral for the Tenpenny property purchase for future city projects located along Franklin Road, City of Murfreesboro's applicant. Mr. Huddleston.
Chairman Lamb, a neighboring property, this is adjacent to the Richards property, was 40 acres, again purchased for future city projects. It's a real estate action by the City of Murfreesboro that requires mandatory referral to the Planning Commission and recommends your approval of the mandatory referral in regards to the Tenpenny property purchase.
Any questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Huddleston. Mr. Ives has one mandatory referral under other business that is pertaining to the purchase of 11.7 acres from the White family heirs along North Highland Avenue. Mr. Ives.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try to be as brief as Mr. Huddleston was. The city's now proposing to purchase this 11.7 acre tract, which had come before you recently as a proposal for townhouses known as the Cove at Oaklands. As the developer proceeded, he discovered that there were substantially greater amounts of wetlands and floodway than he had previously anticipated, making his project economically suspect, in fact, probably prohibitive. After that happened, the city has been in touch with the heirs and is proposing a purchase of this. It will remain open green space for the time being. It'll provide us with some wetlands that will be helpful in the future as we disturb wetlands constructing Cherry Lane. It'll also provide park and rec area, and hopefully will be a component of a trail from roughly the police building on Highland Avenue over to Memorial Boulevard. So we would request that Planning Commission consider and recommend this approval that anticipate council considering soon.
I would applaud the purchase of this. I think it's a great addition to Oakland's Park. I think it's great protection for the historic springs that are located on the adjacent property to this. And then this goes a long way in protecting the wetlands, and with the wildlife habitat that's there, I think it's a win-win for everybody, and potential great location for another park here in the heart of our city. So I really applaud the council for moving along with this. This is great. Any other comments?
There has been a lot of conversation and effort, and I think we've had over 1,000 people sign a petition and showing concern about this property. I agree with you, Bob. We've looked at the property for quite some time. In reality, the property was for sale at a much higher price than the $300,000 that the city has currently agreed upon to pay for the property. And I've already gotten a couple notes saying the city's a real estate tycoon and all their comments, but in response to that, the city buys property to stimulate economic development. The city buys property to preserve historical significance. The city buys property for several reasons, but it's not to make money off buying and selling property, and that's one thing that I want to make absolutely clear. We have decided to purchase this property if the majority of the council agrees on it. Based on the fact that we need the credit to mitigate some of the wetland property as we develop Cherry Lane. We need the property because it will be an asset to our greenway system, because there is a vision of some people of extending a trail from Oakland Mansion going down through this area and going around to where the Hastings bookstore is, just following the creek line through there. And there's a lot of wildlife and I'm told endangered species. To me, they just look like birds and deer, but I'm told that there's some in there that are extremely rare. And this is a great purchase. It's a wonderful purchase for the city if we do it, and I hope the council agrees tomorrow night.
Would you like to follow that up with a motion?
I will make the motion that we continue with the process of purchasing this property.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. As far as I know, that concludes the other business. Mr. Ives or Mr. Whitaker, Mr. Blomley, Mr. Anthony? Don't tell me.
It's easy. And I told you before the meeting.
That was a long time ago.
I promise to make it very, very quick. Back on July 19th, the Planning Commission approved a preliminary plat. It was on the consent agenda for Three Rivers Section 11. A lot was inadvertently left off by SEC. It was lot 350. You'll see 350 in the shaded Section 11. So I offered to Mr. Taylor that I would take it to the planning, and Mr. Taylor's already left, so I think I'm just going to rescind my offer. But I offered to take it to the Planning Commission. Our engineering department generally does not see any issues with going ahead and just adding this lot, but take it back to amend the preliminary plat approval to add that one lot, lot 350, and to make any approval contingent with them submitting that lot on their construction plans and it being approved by the engineering department during the construction plan process. That's it, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Good job. Any questions from Mr. Blomley?
So just lot 350 and that's it?
We're just adding lot 350 to the plat. Everything else remains the same as y'all's approval back last month.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Anything else?
Chairman, I have nothing.
Ladies,
I have
gentlemen,
nothing.
Carolyn, you have anything? Okay. We stand adjourned.